There is a photograph of me at my 55th birthday dinner in 1995 that I have kept on the mantelpiece in the front room for 30 years. In the photograph, I am sitting at the head of the table in the house on Consort Road, and in front of me there is a plate with a piece of cream sponge on it, and I am smiling at whoever is behind the camera. I have looked at that photograph for 30 years and only recently understood what I was looking at. The cream sponge. I have never liked cream sponge, not once in my life. Edmund knew this. My children knew this. And yet there it is in front of me at my own birthday dinner, because it was what someone had brought, and it seemed unkind to say I didn't want it, and I was very good at not saying things like that in 1995. I am going to write a letter now to the woman in that photograph. She is 55 years old, and she is about to make 7 changes to what she eats, and she does not yet understand what she is actually doing. I am 110 years old. My doctor, who is a good and thorough man named Dr. Oyelaran, has now written 3 papers about me, none of which contain the explanation I would give him if he asked me directly. He has not yet asked me directly. Doctors tend to look for the answer in the food. The food is not where the answer is. The tip of my right index finger pressed against my thumb. 41 years of needles, resistance and give. Dear Constance, you are 55 years old and you are sitting at a table in front of a piece of cream sponge. Put it down. There is a woman who has lived at 47 Consort Road in Peckham, London, for 55 years. She turned 110 in April of this year. When the researcher asked her how she had managed it, she looked at the window for a moment and then said, "I stopped eating things I didn't want and started noticing what I did want. That is the whole of it. The rest is just years." She did not elaborate immediately. She pressed the tip of her right finger against her thumb and began again. Dear Constance, you are in 1995, and you do not know that you are about to start paying a different kind of attention. You think what you are doing is dietary, a decision about food. Sensible at 55, you think. The body is changing. Be careful with it. You are not wrong, but you are also missing the larger thing by focusing on the smaller one, the way you sometimes cut the collar before you've checked whether the whole jacket is straight. I want to tell you about the 7 things first, because they are specific, and specificity is how you understand anything. But I want you to know before I begin that by the time I reach the 7th thing, the food will have stopped being the point. The first thing was sugar. Not all of it. You kept the honey you put in your tea on cold mornings, the specific Ghanaian groundnut candy your friend Abina brought twice a year. What you stopped was refined white sugar in the quantities you had been using it since 1961, when you arrived in England, and discovered that English food was built on it in a way that Nigerian food was not, and you had simply accommodated that the way you accommodated everything in those early years, because accommodation was the skill that kept you safe. The smell of white sugar in a mixing bowl in 1961 in your landlady's kitchen in Camberwell, metallic underneath the sweetness. You noticed that smell and ate the thing it was in anyway, because Mrs. Patterson had made it for you, and you were a guest and 21 years old and 3,000 miles from Enugu. You ate things like that for 34 years. At 55, you stopped the refined sugar. Within 8 weeks, the metallic smell, which you had not consciously identified as unpleasant for 3 decades, was gone. You noticed its absence the way you notice when a sound stops that you had stopped hearing. The quiet is louder than the noise had been. That was the first thing the food taught you that had nothing to do with food. The second thing was margarine. This requires context for someone in 1995 who does not know that in 2003, the research on trans fats will become impossible to ignore. In 1955, when you were 15 in Enugu, nobody ate margarine. Your mother cooked with palm oil, with the fat from meat, with the residue of things rendered slowly over heat. When you came to London in 1961, margarine was everywhere because it was cheap, and because the post-war English had got used to it, and because it spread easily from the refrigerator in a way that butter did not in a cold kitchen in November. You ate margarine for 34 years because it was there, and it was convenient, and because questioning it would have been a peculiar thing to do in someone else's country. At 55 in 1995, you stopped and went back to butter. Real butter, the kind that smelled like something. I want to tell you what you noticed within 3 weeks. Your hands. You had been making clothes for 30 years by then, and your hands knew fabric the way a doctor's hands know a body. By texture, by weight, by what the material would do under pressure. In the 3 weeks after you stopped the margarine and went back to butter, the skin on your hands changed in a way you could measure with your fingers. Not dramatically, just more itself. More what it had been in Enugu before you learned to accommodate the cold and the cheapness of things. You stood in the workroom on Rye Lane with a piece of silk charmeuse in your hands, and the quality of the contact was different. You could not have explained this to anyone. You noted it and kept working. The third thing was bread, specifically the white sliced bread in the plastic bag that had been a staple of the house since 1965, when you and Edmund set up the kitchen together, and he had grown up eating it, and it was his bread, and you ate it for 30 years as a fact of the household rather than a choice you had made. Edmund died in 2001, 6 years after you stopped the white bread. I want to be clear that I am not drawing a causal connection. Edmund died of a heart condition that had been building since his mid-50s and had nothing to do with bread. What I am saying is that when you stopped eating his bread in 1995, you noticed for the first time that you had been eating his bread. Not bread, his bread. A specific choice made by a specific person that had become, through repetition and closeness, indistinguishable from your own preference. This is the thing about the food that is not about the food. You had been living in Edmund's country, in Edmund's city, in Edmund's language, eating Edmund's bread for 30 years, and you had done it with love and genuine willingness, and also with a gradual substitution of his preferences for your own that was so smooth and so complete that you had not noticed it happening. The bread was not the cause. The bread was the symptom. The way a fabric puckers at the seam tells you the tension was wrong 2 steps back, not where the pucker is. Press the tip of your finger against your thumb, Constance. You know resistance. You know when the needle is meeting the right amount of it. Now I want to step out of the letter for a moment, because what I am about to say is for the person watching this, not for the 55-year-old woman in the photograph. You are watching this, and you are, I imagine, somewhere between 50 and 75. And you have things in your life that are the equivalent of Edmund's bread. Not bread, but things. Preferences that arrived in your life through proximity to another person, or to a culture, or to a decade of your life, and that have calcified into habit, and that you have not examined because examining them would require admitting that you are not certain they are yours. The food is never the point. The food is just where it's easiest to start. Start there. The rest follows. Slowly, over years, the way a good seam holds, not from one stitch, but from the accumulation of them. Dear Constance, back to the letter. The fourth thing was processed meat. The fifth was artificial flavoring, the specific flavoring in certain crisps and packet soups and stock cubes that was meant to approximate something savory and arrived instead as a flat chemical approximation of it, the way a badly cut jacket approximates a well-cut one from a distance, but tells you immediately when you put it on. The sixth thing was fried food of the English variety, the fish and chips wrapped in paper, the battered things from the shop on the high street. Not because frying is wrong. You still fried. You fried the way your mother fried in enugu, in palm oil at the right temperature with the right fish, the smell of it filling the kitchen on Consort Road and making the grandchildren appear in the doorway within 4 minutes without being called. That frying was yours. The other kind was accommodation. I want to tell you about the seventh thing now, because the seventh is the one that took the longest and the one that mattered most. The seventh thing was food eaten in company you did not want to be in. This is not a food, I know that. But at 62 you began noticing, and this took 7 years to notice, so do not be hard on yourself for not seeing it at 55. You began noticing that everything you ate in the presence of people who required performance from you tasted of the performance and not of the food. The cream sponge at 55. The dinners at Edmund's sister Marvella's house throughout the 1970s and 1980s, where the food was perfectly adequate and you tasted almost none of it because the energy required to be the correct version of yourself in that room consumed the attention you would otherwise have given to eating. At 62, you began declining invitations to Marvella's. This was considered rude. It was considered rude for approximately 3 years, and then Marvella died in 1996 at 71, and the question became moot, and you felt, the honest word is relief, and you were surprised by the relief, not because Marvella was gone, but because the obligation was, and the surprise told you something about how long you had been carrying it. I am 110 years old, and I have been in this house since 1969, and the kitchen smells in the morning of palm oil and the specific black pepper I have ground fresh every day since approximately 1962. And when I sit at the table with my tea, I press the tip of my right finger against my thumb, and there is still the callus there. 41 years of needles compressed into a centimeter of skin. I did not live to 110 because I stopped eating sugar. Dr. Oyelaran is looking for that explanation, and I respect his looking. What I know, not what I concluded, but what I know in the way you know when the seam is right because the fabric lies flat without being told to, is that at 55, I began the slow and irregular process of removing from my life the things I had accepted out of proximity rather than chosen for myself. The food was where I started because the food was concrete and daily and easy to see. But it was never about the food. It was about learning at 55, after 34 years of accommodation, to notice what I actually wanted, to let the body's signals come in and take them seriously rather than offering them up to whatever the room required. That practice, not eating correctly, not any particular diet, just the practice of paying honest attention to what was mine and what was borrowed from the room, is the only explanation I can give Dr. Oyelaran that is true. Dear Constance, put down the cream sponge. Not because cream sponge is harmful, because it is not yours. Start with the food. Start with anything. But start finding out which things in your life, when you're honest with yourself in a quiet kitchen before anyone else is awake, are actually what you want. The ones that are yours. Keep those. They will outlast most things.